What's going on, everybody, and welcome in to this edition of the Card Central Post Game right here on STL Sports Central, powered by DraftKings. The crown is yours. Brenden Schaeffer, Ethan Hannaford, along for the ride after a Cardinals win 6-2 over the Colorado Rockies tonight out in Denver. And wouldn't you know it, Michael McGreevy might be a nice little addition to the rotation. But we begin here, Ethan. The grand takeaway from this game, what does it mean? King's Echo says nothing. Doesn't mean anything to beat the Rockies tonight.
Well, you know what? King's Echo is wrong. Because you know what? 24 wins, schmoney schmore schmins. Like, who cares? The Rockies, they may be the historically worst baseball team in the history of modern day baseball.
They might be, yeah.
But the Cardinals are back, baby. We are so back. We are all in. We are buying. Let's go. I'm all in. I am all in on this team. And I learned a lot about this team over these 9 innings of play. Hey, Michael McGreevy, 2 runs at Coors Field, like where you're supposed to hit bombs every inning. Like, come on.
Sir, you've been drinking this evening? Sir, please step out of the vehicle. Cardinals win 6-2. No, it doesn't mean that the season is back, but it is. I said that today, and I wrote for STLSportsCentral.com, Ethan, a prerequisite to even the consideration that the Cardinals shouldn't immediately sell Helsley, Maton, and whatever other expiring assets that they can. The prerequisite is sweeping this series. I am not even willing to discuss the idea of holding on to any of those short-term assets without first sweeping the Rockies because they're terrible. And then, that San Diego series is going to loom large. You play 4 games back at Busch Stadium later on this week and into the weekend. That is the team occupying the 3rd wildcard spot. You still have to jump the Giants as well, but you sweep the Rockies, you take 3 or 4 from the Padres. I would be willing to consider that the Cardinals would be back in as a contender. But we want to start with this and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Start with this. I mean, Michael McGreevy's got to stay in this rotation, right? It seems like the most obvious thing in the world. It took the Cardinals. I mean, they still haven't really replaced Eric Fedde. He's pitching tomorrow. Again, that's not an excuse. You must sweep the Rockies or there's no conversation to be had. But Liberatore needing some additional rest, which I think makes sense when you look at his workload. But I don't care how they do it. We have to stop acting like this is rocket surgery here. Michael McGreevy stays in the rotation. You figure out which of your underperforming starters needs to go before his next time to pitch, and then you call it good. You agree, disagree? Where are you at on this?
First off, some gamesmanship here to King's Echo. Well played indeed. I appreciate you detecting the sarcasm. Clearly, Bad Mike did not detect the sarcasm in my little, I don't know what I would call it.
That's okay.
My delusional.
I'll call it your little play.
I'll say that it was delusional. I will agree with you there. It was delusional. But no, I mean, to me personally, watching Michael McGreevy out there tonight, the game face was on. And not that it isn't always when he throws, but this one felt a little bit more so, a little bit different. And the reason I say that is because it's not much of a secret anymore that Ollie Marmol is beginning to more and more make it known that he wants Michael McGreevy up here. And
I keep him? Can I keep him? Yes.
Right. I want the new shiny toy. He wants the new shiny toy. And Mozeliak is just not giving it to him consistently, unfortunately. This and I have to imagine at some point, right, you find ways to have that edge as a starting pitcher. And to me, it wouldn't surprise me if Michael McGreevy is kind of using this as his edge or used that tonight. This was a dominant outing. Yes, against a bad Colorado Rockies team. You take that part with a grain of salt, right? But you know what? If Michael McGreevy would have had a bad start tonight too, and if he would have gone 5 innings and allowed 4 runs, I probably would have said, like, yeah, it's this guy's going back and forth. Who knows when he arrived in Denver? For all we know, he could have arrived this morning. So while it is an encouraging start, right, I feel like you can only take so much from it as an individual start. Michael McGreevy, if he stays up from this point the rest of the year, is not going to give you 7 innings of 2-run ball every single outing. But you saw the game face. You're pitching at altitude. You could tell, especially later in the game, a lot of deep breaths, working through that. I was really impressed with what we saw tonight from Michael McGreevy, and it's more so right in contrast with what you're getting and what you've gotten the last 3 days from your starting pitchers, where in the first 3 innings of the last 3 games, the games were all over. Three innings in. And for you to get Michael McGreevy, who's been banging at the door all season long to make his way up here, for him to do what he did tonight, it feels like a statement. And I tell you what, I've been wrong a couple of times on this. After they moved Fedde's start before the All-Star break, I didn't think that I thought McGreevy was going to start in his place, and I didn't think he was going to get sent back down. I feel even more sure now. I don't know how you justify sending Michael McGreevy down at this point. And part of it has to do with what he did tonight, but more so it has to do with the contrast between what you've seen the last 3 days from your starting pitching and now. This is not about it's partially about giving the young guy the opportunity. It's also about just having the better guy up there. The trade deadline is close. Eric Fedde is going to get his final start before the deadline. That is not going to change. They're going to try and see if they can get literally anything for him. Fine. But that doesn't mean you have to send Michael McGreevy back down. This is a guy that should be in the rotation the rest of the year. And I don't know how you can find an excuse to not have that be the case.
They will not send McGreevy back down. I'm going to tell you right now. They won't do it.
I don't think Ollie will let them.
I rarely go out on that type of limb and declare to you when I don't have insider knowledge what's going to happen, but they're not going to send down McGreevy, I think for the reason partially that Ethan just mentioned. But also, how big of a clown shoes operation would this look like if you have a guy go 7 innings when you have been straining to get your starters deeper into games? Michael McGreevy, he takes no quarter. He will throw you strikes in the zone. He will trust his defense behind him, and he will figure out a way. Is he going to be a guy that's a frontline starter, ace of a rotation? No. I don't believe McGreevy will ever really be that, like a true guy who misses bats and averages more than a strikeout per inning. It's unlikely to me that we see that in his big league career. But he pitches to contact, and he has found a way to do so effectively when his stuff is on. Had 1 strikeout tonight, but you know what else he doesn't do? Generally speaking, he doesn't give away base runners. No walks in the game tonight. That's how he's able to get through 7 innings on 91 pitches. So, I mean, again, it's the Rockies lineup, but it is that Coors Field, so you have to kind of make that consideration as well. Not an easy place to pitch. He figures out a way and, has an inning where there's a hiccup defensively. Vic tried to bite off more than he can chew on that play where he was coming in on the ball, and it gave up an extra base, allowed a run to score, and have given up another run later in that inning. McGreevy pitched great, though. Is it going to be perfect every time? Again, no. When you don't miss bats, when you log 1 strikeout, we can acknowledge that there are going to be some limitations. But also, I don't think he minds that. Breaking pitches aren't going to move as much when you're in the altitude. He's going to throw. He's going to throw in the strike zone, and he's going to allow his defense to work behind him. Lance brings up a fantastic point. 3 batters in 28 innings this year. His last 28 innings pitched, Eric Fedde has walked 20 batters, has not made it through the 6 in those starts.
That's a great goal.
And look, Fedde, Ethan, chat, Fedde might go tomorrow and throw 7 innings of 1-run baseball, and we'll pat him on the back and say, well done. But in speaking in terms of what you can reasonably expect, that is not, I think, in the range of outcomes that we would reasonably expect from Eric Fedde tomorrow. And it's a shame that the Cardinals have allowed this to carry on. And it's not just Eric Fedde, because Michaelis is struggling as well. Palante is struggling as well. So when you look at everything over the course of the month of July, really, you go, wow, they've lost a lot of games. Their starting pitching has been among the worst in the league. It's just so inconsistent. Let's be clear. Sonny Gray gave up 8 earned runs on Saturday. He was the worst of the 3 starters that pitched over the weekend in Arizona. So it does not just fall on one guy. But that is not a reason or an excuse to the front office to not make a decision about which guy you're going to replace. And you can make up an injury if you really are worried about hurting somebody's feelings, if you're worried about, telling a guy that he loses his job, whatever. McGreevy's got to be in the rotation. This notion has crept up even more in recent days, and it's being widely reported, and so I'm not disputing it. but that they're gauging Eric Fedde's trade value, regardless of if this is a buy type of deadline for the Cardinals or a sell version of a deadline. Fedde is on the block. I think that's pathetic. I think it's pathetic because they are holding out for this idea that if Eric Fedde puts together a serviceable outing one time, that suddenly teams are going to believe that he is their answer in a different way than they believe it to be true tonight on Monday. If he throws well on Tuesday, suddenly teams are either they're waiting for other pitchers around the league to get injured, so suddenly there's more desperation to go grab Eric Fedde, or they're biding their time hoping that they're going to be able to not necessarily get a great prospect back for Fedde, Ethan. Really, to me, it's just an idea that they might save $1 million or so. Like, if they can get rid of him without just a DFA and let him go out there on waivers, well, nobody's probably claiming him because he's owed a couple $1 million, right? They could then just cast him aside and release him, and somebody could pick him up. The Cardinals are seemingly more concerned with making sure that it's not a sunk cost that they traded Tommy Edman for Eric Fedde. They're more concerned with, like, what they're going to get back for Fedde than these 2-3 starts that he's making in the month of July could be the difference in making the playoffs and missing them. And it's gotten to a point where we're talking about this Colorado series. You have to sweep it, and then you have to beat the Padres. And even then, I'm not sure that you can definitively say, yeah, we're not listening on Helsley and Maton at that point, with then one series remaining before the deadline. It's just a shame because now, of course, they should be selling these guys, the short-term assets that are on expiring contracts. They should be selling them because of where they are in the standings. They didn't necessarily have to be in this spot, though. They could have been a couple games better than what they are had they done something different earlier in the month. That's what's frustrating to me about this. I'll be hoping for the best from Eric Fedde tomorrow, but I wanted to get that out there because it's frustrating. I believe they have played themselves, due to their inaction, into a situation where now it's palatable to sell. But had they won a couple more games, had they not totally tanked the idea of this roster being competitive in some of these contests where the starters go out and they give up so many runs early, no wonder the bats aren't able to kind of contend with it. I know they're major league players and they should be able to hit through even if it looks like a daunting task. I just feel like they've left some meat on the bone in July, Ethan, to where it wouldn't be such an obvious sell spot as I believe it to be right now if they had approached the month differently from an organizational perspective, which starts up top.
Yeah, and I almost wish they I don't know. I'm fine with Fedde making his final start now.
Yeah.
At this point, you've committed to it. I wish that they would have gone in differently and said, "Okay, we're going to commit to our guy, and we're gonna if we get something for him, we get something for him. If not, good riddance." But now at this point, right, you've committed so far to it. I was kind of this was kind of intriguing to me. I was listening to Bernie Hub or to Bernie Central, excuse me, earlier. And Bernie Miklasz brought up that I believe is either that or Cardinal territory. It's one of the two. I think it may have been.
That's okay.
But he brought up that he compared it to Paul DeYoung and what they got for him in 2023 being Matt Swanson and a guy that was clearly everyone was over him as far as the fan base goes. He was not contributing really at all to your team and hadn't been for a while. I guess and you ended up holding out instead of DFAing him and releasing him. And you ended up getting a guy that has now been contributing when he's been up here at the major league level this year. And I don't know if they can get a Matt Swanson or someone that could eventually contribute, but it seems intense, right? If that's the mindset at the beginning of July, when you're still very much so in the mix and saying we're holding out so we could get another Matt Swanson potentially. I don't know if that feels worth it to me from what there's no guarantee that that's what you get from Eric Fedde. They don't know that this is the Eric Fedde that they get in July. They don't know that it gets progressively worse throughout the month. So, the hindsight's 20/20. But I tell you what, when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, I mean, when you've seen consistently what Michael McGreevy's been able to provide compared to what Eric Fedde has been here down the stretch, when you look at the Cardinals' mindset of we want to put the best product out there, we still think that we can compete, but you don't have the best guy up there, it just doesn't really make sense. This is a former first-round draft pick. I mean, this isn't some random prospect. This is a guy that you had enough confidence in at the time of the draft to say, like, yeah, he's going to be a guy that we feel we can rely on in the future. And I'm not saying they don't think that, but to a certain extent, it's telling you a little bit with how they've handled this, and I don't agree with that at all. I probably backed keeping Eric Fedde as long as they did, up to a certain point, longer than a lot of people did, because how the Cardinals have been able to get through this major league season up to this point with no starting pitching injuries, is a straight up miracle. They probably are the only team in Major League Baseball up to this point that has not had to deal with an injury to their starting rotation this year. That is such an anomaly in today's game of baseball. So to a certain extent, I did understand it. But you get to a point, right, where you're trying to figure out what your team is, to where you have to say what's done is done. With how bad he had been as of recent, the last however many starts, they haven't necessarily agreed, and they're taking it the way that they are. And the saddest part, right, is that I think that the manager would probably, I don't want to speak for Ollie Marmol, but it sounds like he hasn't been a huge fan of how this process has gone. And even today, the quotes that were being released online by some of the writers was that he doesn't want him to go back down. He wants him up here, and if he's coming up and staying, someone else has to go. And I mean, I think it's kind of obvious at that point who that person is going to be.
Yeah, and we'll see. I mean, Eric Fedde pitches tomorrow. A couple things here. Like, it's kind of crazy that it's taken this long when there's a coalescence of a couple of factors. One is this idea of building for the future, seeing what you have in the young guys. That oftentimes is seen under a lens of probably not going to be as competitive in the here and now. But the other part is that he's more competitive in the here and now, we would think, than what they've gotten from Eric Fedde recently. And like, even if that's not the case, you're at least able to fall back on, well, we're learning and this kid's getting experience so that next year when he's in the rotation full time, he can have that experience under his belt. All he talked about in some of the quotes that I read, it being a valuable stretch for him to be able to get this experience, get knocked around a little bit, and then get back up the next 5 days later. Like, those are important factors here. With Eric Fedde, he's had really good outings at times in the year. It felt like watching his outing against the Braves when he went 4 2/3, gave up a couple of home runs, gave up 3 earned runs. And that felt like the best you were absolutely going to get from him. And that was just a very mediocre outing. Maybe he can improve upon that tomorrow. They're going to give him the opportunity to try. Part of it is a lack of depth. That was kind of a factor that we knew about coming into the season, which is why, to your point, the Fedde and Michaelis usage between the beginning of the season and now largely can understand it, because they didn't have the luxury to just dump these guys loose, especially when they were outperforming their peripheral numbers and their expectations. But it's just one of those deals where at a certain point you do have that one iron in the fire, Michael McGreevy, that you can make a decision to jettison somebody else, even if it's a short-term injury list type of conversation. But would they have maybe not gotten the same chance to build up Fedde's trade value? That's why I feel like they're letting the caboose drive the train here. That's a very ancillary factor of, will we get a prospect like a Matt Swanson for Fedde? That's one thing. Will we save the cash? I'm insisting that if that's what's driving the conversation, that is what is just shameful. I don't know what Eddie was talking about to say that he was disagreeing. I don't know if it was Ethan when you were, making jokes at the beginning of the show about how we're back and we're buying. But no, I think Ethan and Bernie very much on the same page. Bernie's concept of selling was what he was talking about today. So Eddie, it might have gone
that came from Bernie. That's the direction that they're talking about going, or that he mentioned. That's the mindset, right? And that's not saying that Matt Swanson hasn't been a piece that's been beneficial this year. It just feels like a lot looking at the beginning of the month and saying, that's what's the best you could get out of Eric Fedde when you're looking at him at the beginning of the month? Are you hoping that it ends up being just a couple of bad starts? Is that that he goes back to the form that he had been for a good portion of the year? Is that what it is? Even then, what's the best that you're getting for him? I don't know.
And the best you're getting for him is saving the money. That's what I'm insisting. Maybe you get a Swanson, which would be a worthwhile endeavor. But something else I'll mention, it's not comparable to 2023. The Cardinals were 13 games below 500 at the deadline when they sold Paul DeJong. and he wasn't playing as much. I'd have to go back through the box scores and see how often he played in the late stages of July. You're talking about a starting pitcher for a team that was 5, 6, 7 games above 500 as recently as a week or two ago. Completely different that the Cardinals are allowing. Maybe we'll get a couple $1 million in cash savings and, a very ancillary level prospect for this player. And we won't get embarrassed because people won't be able to say we got nothing for Tommy Edman. I'm telling you, if that's part of the conversation, that is where they are making an error. If it's money driving it for a team that was in the race, now I don't know that they are, but you've allowed Eric Fedde to continue to make starts. And look, Michaelis is making starts too. Palante's, I get all of that, but you can only replace one of them. Not knowing specifically which guy is the most fair and equitable to replace doesn't absolve you from having to make a decision. And I feel that John Mozeliak has struggled with making it's not even a bold decision at this point. It's just the requisite decision. And in recent years of his tenure, I feel that has been a sore spot for him. We'll get back into the comments here in just a moment. But first, I want to remind you that DraftKings Pick 6 is on like Donkey Kong right now during baseball season. And of course, you got football season around the corner. So really, there's no better time to go ahead and download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now. And you can use code STL Sports. That's code STL Sports for new customers to play $5. And when you do that, you get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Better payouts, bigger wins, only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 and over. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. One per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
Ethan and Eddie Money are fast friends now. Just a slight misunderstanding, and everybody's now on the same page. It's all love, Eddie. I want to get into the comments, but first, before I feel like we've glossed over it, Ethan, I just want to mention it was a nice performance tonight by the lineup. You get 15 hits. You get several guys with multi-hit games. Walker, Wynn, Arenado, Contreras, and Donovan, all with multi-hit games in this one. Contreras was on fire, a triple short of the cycle. He's got the OPS up to 777. Burleson was one of the few, really the only guy that did not have a great day, and he ended up leaving the game with a bit of a tweaked, was it the knee after fouling a pitch off? I'm not 100% sure, but he left the game.
He fouled a pitch off the inside of his foot, and he fouled it really hard. And his last swing was, half-hearted, and he left immediately after. So
you're hoping, heaven forbid, you don't want any more injuries to happen to this team, because Garrett Hampson is who came in for him, and Lars Nootbaar is out. Not a great update from John Mozeliak that I read from Denver today on Newt. He's still not able to swing a bat with that side discomfort. Gorman maybe a little closer, but you can't necessarily afford to lose Burley as well. But just generally your thoughts kind of on the offense tonight. That's what we need to see, Ethan, but it's also got to continue tomorrow and the next day. I think the guy tomorrow has a 9.9 ERA and is an individual that I am not convinced isn't like a creative player on MLB The Show or NBA 2K or something. Maybe Bradley Blaylock is the man's name. I'm sure he's a real person, but
it's a pretty good baseball name though. I mean, it's
alliterative. There's a lot to it. I have expectations though for the Cardinals to get runs off of him. That's all I'm saying.
Anytime you get 15 hits, regardless of where you're playing, it's an encouraging sign. So I mean, you'll take that any day of the week. I think more so than anything, right? You look at how terrible the lineup looked in Arizona. I imagine it's probably a little bit of a sigh of relief, right? Like, okay, all right, like we got it back a little bit. Let's see if we can get into a rhythm, right, and start winning some ball games. Because I can tell you this much: all of this noise about what's going to happen at the trade deadline, the only thing regarding the deadline that is being thought of or processed in that clubhouse is like, oh, is my name going to be the one? But besides that, these guys are just, the message doesn't change. Go out and win ball games. It's a day-by-day thing. When you play 162, you can't look at it too big. And the trade deadline, I imagine, while for us it's going to come quickly, for them, I mean, it's a day at a time. So for them, to be able to put together 15 hits, an encouraging sign. I believe that Alec Burleson was the only starter that didn't have a hit tonight.
I think that's right.
Jordan Walker, a couple of hits. He struck out a couple of times as well. and not super hard contact made, but he's the guy right now. I mean, you just want he's looked just so uncomfortable to play. I know he had a couple of hits against Arizona, but he's the guy right now. You just want him to build any sort of positive signs to start getting comfortable again in the box, because, you know, and we've talked about it a little bit, right? There were times when he's looked lost since coming back from the injured list. It's going to take time. Give him the time to sort it through. And there's going to be moments when you're going to be like, this is ugly. This does not look good. He looks like he's questioning everything, but this is what it's about, right? I mean, like in the thick of it, right, where it's been ugly lately, and who knows, maybe it gets uglier. Maybe it continues to remain not so pretty. Jordan Walker, you know, this is the time to let him develop, let him get those ABs, and see what you got. Otherwise, like, what's the point if you continue to lose either way? Yes, you have to a certain extent, right, reward the guys that are hitting, but Jordan Walker's just far too important of a potential piece to not give him the consistent opportunities. So I know we're not quite to that point yet, but I imagine that regardless of what you're seeing from him, you're probably going to continue to see the Cardinals put him out there every day, because you just have to give him the opportunity to figure it out and to make it work. He's that important potentially, right, to the future of this ball club, as far as if he is able to do to a certain degree what was expected when he came up. Boy, how does that add to the future of your lineup, and how threatening it could be with a guy like him in the heart of it. Just when you look at his build, the potential for power to be able to drive guys in, you need those kinds of guys in your lineup. So Jordan Walker is going to get the opportunity, even if people aren't happy about it in the midst of struggles. He's going to get his opportunity. He needs to.
Yeah, and look, before Gorman was scratched from the lineup on Friday and Walker had been called up, he wasn't in that original lineup. So I still don't think we're 100% of the way to, if they're at full health, he's going to play every game. But all that being said, the direction they're not going to go, and I saw this from Katie earlier today, they're not going to trade him this month. I'd be very surprised, and I think it would be a mistake. I'm going to be stubborn when it comes to Jordan Walker. I'm gonna have all the Jordan Walker to myself, and if he ends up turning into a great player, it's going to happen with the Cardinals. I cannot, as the St. Louis Cardinals, allow it to happen somewhere else for Walker. So you be stubborn. If you make that decision, you make it at another point in time. You have another thought on Walker real quick?
No, a quick update on Alec Burleson. John Denton tweeting, had x-rays on his right foot at Coors Field. They came back negative, so a good sign after fouling that ball off of his right foot in the top of the sixth inning. Still unsure, though, if he will be able to play on Tuesday. That's the
which
update
will be interesting
from the ballpark.
We've got Chewy has asked a bunch of times, so I'll address this. Consider bringing up. Everybody loves Nathan Church. I'm all about it. He's got 1,000 OPS in AAA. He's got a good outfield arm. He could play all three outfield spots. Crooks, I don't see it. I don't see it this year for Jimmy Crooks unless there's another injury to one of the current catchers, Pozo or Pajes. I would be surprised to see it. Even with Herrera kind of decommissioned from catching, I don't think they think Crooks is ready defensively. Time will tell. Time will tell. Spring's going to be huge for Jimmy Crooks. I'm not out on Jimmy Crooks. I just think that they will do it if they're pressed into action on it, but I don't think it's something that they're looking to do because they wanted to continue to develop and get playing time. He's not going to get that in the big leagues with the way it's currently constructed. Church would be my first call if Alec Burleson needs to hit the IL. And you'd say, but Brenden, he's on the 40-man. And I would say, I will find you 5 spots, and I will do it tonight if you need me to. Look, maybe not 5. That's not very nice, but it can be done. I could get you a spot for Nathan Church on the 40-man if you're down all of those outfield bats, Nootbaar, Burleson, et cetera. Gorman as a lefty off not your outfield depth, but same thing because Donnie kind of can go either way. I will find you a spot. So, yes, Church, I'm all in on, especially if Burley were to need IL. Probably Burley will need a day off. You'll probably see Hampson in there tomorrow. But if Burley did need IL for this, that would be a call I would make. I would find a spot for him. Something else I want to address, a good question here. A couple of folks have asked about it. Joseph mentioning that the Rockies announcers said McGreevy cannot be sent down anymore without clearing waivers. Is that true? And along those same lines, we had another question from Samuel asking about the limit as to how many times a player can be yo-yoed to AAA. They do have a limit. It's 5. To my knowledge, he's been optioned 4 times. So he could be option one more. That would be 5. Then he could be recalled again, and then he would have to be optioned. That being said, I don't think it's going to be a problem. They're not going to option him. If they do, you'll see me on the next time I'm on an STL Sports Central show going, Mo, what are we doing? But they're not going to do it. You don't get 7 innings in the current environment of what their rotation has been giving them, and you look that gift horse in the mouth. There's no freaking way. They'll have to make a big boy decision about somebody else. I don't care who it is. I think we kind of have a couple of options. Like Palante's not going anywhere. Michaelis has struggled. Fedde has struggled. It feels like Fedde is the one on more thin ice. I think that is an interpretation with which I agree. But it is what it is. McGreevy has to be in your rotation. They're paid to figure out how to handle that, but they have to keep this kid in the rotation. They've already and I know he's gotten beaten up in Memphis the last couple starts before tonight, and yet it didn't matter, did it? He came up, was given the opportunity that he probably deserved already, and found a way to shove. He probably could have done more than what those other options had been giving you. Do you have an extra win or two right now if they had managed McGreevy differently? Not talking about since April. I'm talking about since the end of June, when it was like, hey, Fedde's given up a couple touchdowns. Do we care? And it was like, no, he should pitch at Wrigley on Sunday. Okay, that's not going to go well. He walked the world and didn't get out of the second inning. That's sort of the vibe there. And then there's a thought on Liberatore. I want to get your thought on this, Ethan. Concerned about Libby. They're skipping him today with McGreevy going. Are you concerned, or is this preventative? To me, it's just seeing the mounting workload and saying, hey, let's make sure we get out ahead of this.
I think that's what it is right now. I think that they're going to have to be really aware of Matthew Liberatore and his workload in the second half. I don't know if they're going to shut him down. I think they don't know if they're going to shut him down yet. I think it probably is dependent on how his stuff looks. And I'm not even necessarily talking about the box score, talking more so about the velocity, the spin rate, all that stuff that goes into the mechanics, right? And seeing how's he feeling. Is this having to do with fatigue, in which some of these numbers are dropping off?
Yeah.
I don't think they've made that decision yet. I think it's going to be based a lot more so off of that. What I do think I could see likely, rather than them just all of a sudden the next step is shutting him down, is it wouldn't surprise me if this is not the only time that they did this in the second half. What I think is a much more realistic option, and I think that what the Cardinals would prefer to do, is maybe, I think this is good maintenance for Matthew Liberatore. Give him the extra week. Part of you wonders maybe they should have done it earlier, because he has been kind of at this, he hasn't been at the same level now for, what is it now? Probably the last couple of months. But I
just looked it up, Ethan. Since June the 1st, he's got a 6 ERA. So, I mean, it's been some good, some bad in there, but just the overall numbers have been down. Yeah,
they've been down. The strikeout numbers have been down. And that's an area of his game that was really strong early on. And Cook commenting here, saying that the walk rate has also been high. So, it hasn't been good as of late. This is a smart decision by the Cardinals to give him an extra week, give him a breather. If you're going to have Matthew Liberatore out there, have the better version of him. Make sure you're taking care of him. And I think it wouldn't surprise me if we see them do this another time or two, where they skip his turn through the rotation to make sure that you're getting a good quality Matthew Liberatore here down the stretch. I think you're much more likely to see that than to see him get shut down. But if it just continues to deteriorate to the point that you're like, this is just not good for his development, then maybe they do shut him down. I think they're going to do everything in their power to keep that from happening, though.
And I believe they probably are looking to avoid, I don't think they're thinking in terms of shutdown. I think they're seeing what we're seeing, which is not only the box scores are looking less prolific, but the behind the scenes and the under the hood type of stuff a little more concerning recently as well. Cook mentioned some of the mechanical stuff that just it maybe gets away from you a little bit. Now, Liberatore has his big thing is all right, 86 innings last year. He's up to 100 now. Obviously, already exceeded that. He was 126 innings in 2023, and he was at 149 3 years ago in 2022. So it's not like he's never been to this level, but it's been a minute. And the Cardinals very much want to be careful with that, because, again, you're looking to have him as somebody that's penciled in for next year. The recent performances from Liberatore have not been consistent enough to where, you probably feel great about that. So We'll see what ends up happening there. I'm not overly worried, though, but, to answer the question, you're not the only one that's thinking about it, clearly, to the commenter that asked about that. We'll see. Samuel says, well, Quinn can cover his September starts. No, I actually don't think any of the pitching prospects that haven't been called up yet will be ready on opening day 2026. I do not believe Quinn Matthews will be ready quite by that point. Mid-year 2026, sure. But he's lost some time due to injury. Tim Kent is on the IL. Tekoa Roby's on the IL. I don't think, Ethan, those prospects that we're going, 2026, it's going to be a breeze. I don't think not a one of them is going to be ready day one. And I don't want the Cardinals to rush them into it either. They'll all come to spring training hoping to, prove themselves. I think they should take it easy with each and every one of them. And they should do a couple of things. A, trade for a starter in the next 10 days. I legitimately would if they're willing to have Chaim Bloom involved in some of the decisions, because I wouldn't let Mo do it alone. Find the bat, and maybe now it doesn't work because you have half your roster on the injured list. But if you had more health, I would be, if not now, you do it in November. You find the bat that, I'm not saying whoever's low man on the totem pole. If you're like, I don't trust Gorman, he should be the one traded. Or I don't trust Walker, he should be the one traded. Whatever it is. You find the one that you can get something for, and you get a controllable starter. You might have to give a package. You might have to give a prospect with a bat. Whatever the case might be. I'm talking about guys like Taj Bradley. I would also go through and go after guys like Reed Detmers. Look for those reclamation projects that had real good stuff when they were drafted. They had hype. They had intrigue. And see if your new kind of development staff can fix those guys. That's the way I would approach it if I were the Cardinals. But Steve agreeing in the comments about Matthews. He just has not been totally healthy, up and down in AAA, which is fine. Guys are allowed to, have their own path. I'm not by any means giving up on Quinn Matthews, but I would say you can look at a box score in AAA and go, well, he's looked pretty good. Time to call him up. Like, I think you got to pump the brakes a little bit on that. But to this question that Stanley asked, and I'll get your thoughts, Ethan. Will Chaim Bloom have any say on what happens at the deadline is probably the biggest question in my mind surrounding the team. The one that probably won't get answered in any substantive way. But I would be very curious to know, all right, we're going to sell. Okay. It's going to be like a small sell, like a Helsley Maton. Okay. How is that going? Mozeliak has been at the reins the entire time. How does Chaim Bloom influence those conversations? Hey, we're going to do a little bit of both. We might have a buy type of move where we're trading for a controllable piece, and it's just like a classic baseball trade. Who influences that? It's a fair question that Stanley has here.
At this point, you'd like to think that every single decision that is being made from a managerial standpoint right now, an upper managerial standpoint right now, is a two-man game. And where John Mozeliak has the final say. I'm only saying that because he still holds the title, and that's what they said was the case, that Mo still held all the final says in 2025. But anything right now that is not a two-man discussion as far as any sort of impact on the future is, in my opinion, doing a disservice to the organization right now. I mean, Chaim Bloom has to be involved, even to the point of some of these guys getting sent back down to the minors and looking at the options, right? What you want, who you want to be working through development here in these later months if the Cardinals are to sell, and there's going to be potentially a few more bullpen spots opening up. I mean, Chaim Bloom, I think, needs to be involved in that very much so. So it's going to be interesting to see what exactly that will look like. And like you said, I don't think I would be surprised if we get a straight up answer. Maybe Mo's a pretty forward person. Maybe post deadline, I'm sure someone will ask what was the involvement of Chaim Bloom in these decisions, and who knows? Maybe he does give an honest answer. But before the deadline, I'd be surprised if we get we get that to the answer to that question. You brought up Taj Bradley or someone like that, someone with some control. It brings up the question, and this is something to dive into probably deeper in another episode. But, if you are looking at some of the guys at the major league level that you would consider surplus, and you aren't necessarily wanting to move on from them yet, are you considering maybe looking at some of your catching prospects? They have 3 of them right now in the top 6 of their system. Or maybe if you mentioned a package, I wonder if one of them would be involved. You mentioned a Jimmy Crooks. He's one of the options. And in fact, right now, while he's the closest to the majors, he's gone from being a top 4 prospect to, I think he's at number 6 now, and 2 catchers in the system have jumped him. So, and there's only so much you can take from those, right? I mean, that's the MLB sharing their opinions. It's not the Cardinals, as far as I know, sharing their thoughts. But that could potentially be an interesting thing to keep an eye on as well. Could the Cardinals dip into some of the surplus that they have in the system as far as catchers go to maybe bring in one of those pieces that you mentioned, Brendan?
Yeah, I feel like if you're getting a controllable arm, someone's going to want to pitcher back, but you have some legit bats and a surplus for sure when it comes to catchers. So time will tell on the way that's going to play out. But that's going to do it for our show tonight, coming up on the 11 p.m. hour locally here in St. Louis. Appreciate you all for tuning in and for getting the comments in. Anything that we didn't get to, make sure to ask it the next time. There's a lot of J.J. Weatherholt stuff, a lot of Bradley stuff, which, by the way, Taj Bradley, I think that was a Bob Nightingale report from about a week ago. The Rays are always creative. They could buy, they could sell, do a little bit of everything. But that's going to wrap it for us here on the Cards Central Postgame Show presented by DraftKings, where the crown is yours here on STL Sports Central. Make sure to tune in tomorrow morning. I believe the Randy Carricker Show is up next, and I will be on the panel for that one starting at 10 a.m. sharp to continue the Cardinals conversation. For Ethan, I'm Brendan. Thank you all for tuning in, and we are done for now.